I'm just going to bluntly say this. It's baffled me since 2003, and we had all the data from call source to know how many calls were answered, how they were handled, did a lease get set. We gave all those metrics too. And back then we had humans listening to call because there wasn't, the technology there is now to feed, a whole line of calls in and have it score them. So, and here's the other sad part. Those stats you just threw out haven't changed. It's the same number of missed calls as it was in the old days. At what point do you either accept it or do you actually make change to make that number go down a couple points?
Okay, welcome to the Digital Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Reed, today we have Joe Summers on. I feel like now it would be safe. I didn't know if the name of his new company set you off.
Synergy?
Yeah.
Not particularly.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's a buzzword in itself, or
Yeah. Because like years ago, like back when we were still at the Post, like you had this one. There's a period in time where you were really set off by people at the Post using the word synergy.
You're right.
And you
can't believe you remember that, but you're right. I went through at least 18 months of I had an allergy to that word. Yeah. And I think it started with a Weird Al Yankovic short
I was gonna
where he was hitting all the buzzwords, and it wasn't specific necessarily to marketing. And he had a couple in there pointed at synergy.
Yeah.
And it just made me attuned to it, like I couldn't stop seeing it or hearing it. And then I had a big problem with it. So let's thank you for bringing that up. Well, Joe, I'm over it. I think I am, but just hearing David bring that up, I don't know if you can keep the company name.
Just because I felt like we clicked so well with Joe, I could bring it up as the intro. But did you just another aside? But did you watch the Weird Al Yankovic movie?
I may have. I don't even know how it would have happened, but seen pieces of it.
It was amazing.
Was it
amazing? Yeah. It would be one to.
Was it just one kind of like prolonged kind of Weird Al Yankovic type skit, if you will, or was there actually a real plot?
Well, he wasn't in it, so this was like his biopic, basically.
Oh, okay.
But it was like it was almost like a Weird Al Yankovic version of his biopic, if you will.
Sounds perfect.
It was very one that I would think you'd have to check the whole modern media thing or whatever you look at to see if it'd be okay to watch with your daughters. But I remember it kind of
common sense, common sense media.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Joe, anyways,
noted.
Fun conversation with Joe.
Yeah, he's been in the industry, as he told us, since '99, so he's seen a few things and still has his hands in quite a few different companies. So I think he's got a great pulse for the industry. Certainly, as we enjoy very transparent, open book, and lots of contrarian kind of perspective there. But ultimately, he's trying to help move the industry forward, which is, very much lines up with our purpose. He seems to me to be some sort of multifamily Sherpa now for like startups and tech companies to try and help them better understand the industry, get acquainted with it, and off to a faster start so that, we see more of that kind of integration come together in a good way versus some of the aches and pains that a lot of people experience with it. So yeah, it was a fun conversation.
Yeah, we cover everything from online advertising has changed since his first entry was in via, I think he said Apartment Guide, right? In DC.
Yeah. The Bible, as he called it.
Yeah.
Big book.
It was so thick.
Big book.
All the way through like call tracking, attribution, even just like industry structure. We hit a bit on like branding the management company against like the property. I mean, it was just very wide ranging. So it was super fun to chat with. And I feel like we just ran out of time. Like, I feel like I want to spend more time with the guy.
For sure. I think we just scratched the surface. So he would be good for like, we've never really done a panel on Digital Dudes, but I would probably want him on there if we did, and just hit all sorts of like different topics. He'd be a fun contributor.
Yeah. Well, we hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Joe. Okay, we are here with Joe, who, when I asked him for a fun fact, he said all of his top front teeth are replaced, and he only wants to talk about the stuff he works on now, which sounds like, Joe, you don't work on your front teeth any longer.
No need to.
No need to. But anyways, for the audience, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Joe Summers. I am the founder of Synergy Multifamily Advisors. I've been in the industry since January-ish of 1999. I've been very fortunate to run the technology wave since that time, considering when I started in the industry, technology was a fax machine and an ashtray in a leasing office. Because yes, every single property manager smoked in 1999. So there's my fun fact. And David, just so you know, like I'm very proud of my teeth. I busted them out in hockey, and it only cost me back in the day, like 12, 15 years ago, $22,000 to replace all of these teeth. So I'm very proud of how pretty they look. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's funny because they look great. They look real to me. But it seems like more and more people are having to get that done. I hear how expensive it is. Like it's like many people are paying like over 40 grand to get their teeth done. Which I guess if I didn't have teeth, maybe I'd want to do that too. But it's a shocking amount.
Yeah,
So
and it's better than it was. And honestly, the recovery's the worst. It took a year process. They take your other teeth out. Then they have to prep everything. You're wearing like a retainer the whole time with teeth on it, but then they actually stick, they drill posts up into your jaw, and implants are a long process. But think about this: we're in a people industry. If I didn't have teeth, I wouldn't feel very comfortable talking to you right now on video. So it's worth every penny. But I have friends that have left the country and gone to Costa Rica to get their teeth done just because they do a good job down there. So yeah, it's
man, all them hockey people. So wait a minute, you now I have to back up. When you lost them in hockey, was this because it was before the like mesh guard or what was this?
I did not. Yes, I did not wear a face mask.
You were just a badass. That's what it was.
Now I do. I do. My wife made that a requirement when I spent 22 grand to get these. She's like, you will wear a mask moving forward. So yes, I wear, and I've played lacrosse my whole life, so I'm used to that anyways. And you ask yourself, why didn't I wear that before? Because I was young and dumb, and that's what you do when you're young and dumb. You don't think about teeth and stuff like that, right?
Your wife
So
said, face mask and no more corn nuts if we're gonna get this
yeah,
grill done. All right. Well, Joe,
exactly.
in the industry since '99, give us your I guess maybe career arc in 3 chapters because you off air you were telling us about how you're involved in a half dozen different companies. So yeah, just give folks a little bit of your background.
Look, I always say that I was blessed with a good work ethic. And I'm going to tell a little story just to give people how life in general are microseconds versus minutes. I was actually in retail. In my junior and senior year of college, I worked at Timberland in the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey, where close to where I went to college. And back then, Timberland was a very well-known brand. They're not as much in retail anymore because they wholesale everything. But the store that I went to was a flagship store. All the rappers in New York City would go there. All the sports stars would go there, and it was great. I really discovered then that I loved people. So I graduated. I originally was going to be a spy when I was growing up. I started college with a criminal justice focus with a minor in psychology and sociology. 2 years in, my buddy that did go straight into law enforcement, and this was 1994 or 5 or whatever, called and said, "Don't do it. It's too political. It's not worth it. You deal with too much stuff and you don't get paid enough." So I pivoted, and psychology was my major, sociology and criminal justice were my minor. I really discovered I loved people through retail, so I kind of had a feeling I wanted to go into sales. I graduated, moved back to Maryland, where I live now. I was working in the Georgetown store in Washington, D.C. The store manager was a friend of mine. She ended up leaving. Fast forward 4 or 5 months, my whole family is roofers and electricians, and blue collar, hardworking. I was working on the weekends with my uncle who owns his own roofing company and just helping him out on the weekends doing side, minor repairs and stuff. I was coming down the elevator from a 10-story building, and I ran into the old property manager. I'm sorry, the store manager at Timberland, and her mom coming back from a doctor's appointment, and we just caught up on what she was doing just on the ride down. And next thing I know, 3 days later, I got a phone call from her boss, and it happened to be the apartment guide in Washington D.C. in print advertising, which print advertising in 1999 ruled the world. The Washington D.C. apartment guide, we used to call a Bible. It was as thick as the Bible. That's how big print was. There was no internet advertising. There was no ILSs. There was none of that. So when I talk about how I even got in the industry, it was literally, if I didn't get on that elevator at that exact moment in time, I wouldn't even be in this industry, and I don't even know what I would be doing. I'm sure it'd be something people related, but that's when I always say hard work creates luck. If I wasn't working to help my uncle on the side, I wouldn't have ran into the friend that got me in the industry. If you don't work really hard building your business, you don't get things that fall your way, right? So those kind of things. The timing was also really good, David. I mean, we're talking 1999, right? I made the joke about, a fax machine and an ashtray being like technology back then, but that's the truth. We literally faxed every single month. Here's how lead attribution worked in 1999 and 2000. If I had 90 properties that I serviced or was selling to, we sent a fax 2 days out of every month to every single community and said, "How do we do for you this month?" And you want to know how they always answered? They were always, "You brought us 5 leases. You brought us 10 leases." And it always
Hmm.
attributed to how well you took care of them, what candy you brought them, what pens you brought them, what gifts you brought them. That was lead attribution back then. Um, I was always passionate about marketing and advertising and technology. So that's chapter one, right? Like no technology, it's print. As a matter of fact, the CEO of the Apartment Guide in 2000, I'll never forget it, on an all hands call, he was pounding his hand on the desk saying, this internet thing is a fad. We're not investing in it. We're not going to look into this internet thing because it won't be here. Print will always be king. So you know how that turned out.
We
So
did
I
that
was
in our all hands meeting this morning. So some people are still talking about it.
By the way, look, here's the part of the problem with our industry. It gets, and I don't mean to skip around, but you brought it up. We can go back to it later, but marketing's really broken in our industry, right? Like, there's no brand advertise. Like, a buddy of mine who owns Intrinsic Digital, which is apartment geofencing, and they do retargeting and stuff like that. Matthew Kilmurray's been a friend of mine for 20 years. He used to run marketing at Pizzuto, and he's like, I want to change the model here. You're like, everything everything's not about ROI and marketing, right? So, you know, now I say that when I'm about to tell you about chapter two is that I went to a company called Call Source in 2003, and I helped build the Northeast and then the East Coast, and then nationally grew that company. That entire company model started with lead attribution. So it was technology around what ad sources were effectively working, right? Like, we would put a toll free number on an ad. When it got called, we would record the call and tell you what ad source it came from. That was attribution in 2003. That was state of the art. We were ahead of the curve. But then ILSs came along, and every ILS wanted a tracking number. So we got agreements with apartments.com. Well, it wasn't apartments.com back then, but you know what I mean? Like Move, all those other companies. And we commoditized our own product. So instead of we were getting pennies on the dollar what we were making, because we now went a high volume game and we had our tracking numbers everywhere. So I'll call it 2.5 evolution. Is we changed the entire. We had to rebrand who we were, and we rebranded ourselves not as an attribution company, but we realized that we had 1 million phone calls a month recorded, and we knew how the leasing people were handling them. We knew if they were answering the phone. So we focused more on performance management versus advertising tracking, which to me, that was a pivotal moment in my career, I think, because instead of going to a concrete system of, okay, here's where this traffic's coming from, you're starting to address, hey, guess what? It's not always leads you need. It's answering the darn phone and responding to people. Because even now, I'm shocked by the number of inbounds that aren't even replied to on a property level. So we can get into that later, but I wrote a blog last year because I went apartment shopping with my buddy who's a VP in the industry. And it was very eye opening when you haven't looked for an apartment in 2 decades, how different and reliant companies are on technology. Um, so from Call Source chapter three, I'll just close it out with chapter three. After almost 10 years at that company and redefining who we were to become a performance management company, and we 10x the company, it was my first taste of positioning for acquisition. and going through the acquisition process. Um, that was probably one of my favorite times to do that, just because it was the first. Like, I'm a father of two boys, and they're 19 and 15, and I always tell my friends that are having kids, I'm like, I know it sounds crazy, but you only do it for the first time once, so enjoy every second for the first time, because the next time it happens, you're going to know what to expect, and it's not quite as fun. So it's the same thing with acquisitions, right? Every one of them are different, but you learn more about what not to do than what you learn to do, which is interesting, because I've been a part of 4 or 5 acquisitions, and 2 or 3 did not go well. You know what I mean? So you more learn about what not to do. So I would say the third chapter is really learning what it's really like to be an entrepreneur, and the drive and the passion around building something. And even if you're not positioning for acquisition, to say that, yeah, I 12x that company and I own a percentage of it, like that's satisfying to say. And I'm sorry it was kind of long winded, but it was a complicated question when you've been in the industry for 26 years. So
Hmm.
you know, and lastly, and I give my wife credit for this, I was having a tough time, because if you look at my resume, and if you ever go to like my LinkedIn page or whatever, I don't hide anything on there. And like after Call Source, every 2 years I was moving on, and I was finding out is because we were either selling the company or I scaled the company, and I had to move on to what more of my skill set was within that company. And I still generally own a piece of the companies, even if I move on. So my wife actually said to me one day, "Hey, you need to embrace that. That's what you're known for, is putting those pieces in play to put a company in a successful position." So that's when I went all in on my own company, and I have the pleasure to work with companies that I choose to work with now, which is great.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think there's some people want to be the Jeff Bezos or the Zuckerberg or the Gates that takes their company from zero to whatever 100,000 employees. But
Yeah,
I don't read. I can't remember if it was Jim Collins' book or one of those resources we read a number of years ago. Was just talking about like owning, like if you're really good at like scaling up, or if you're really good at like the
yeah,
efficiency. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's like more of like, don't try to be something that you're not, or that you think the media wants you to be. Instead, just be
right.
you and what you enjoy doing. But anyways, Rita, I got some questions, but where should we go from here?
Well, this one is a little more specific based on what you just shared, and I haven't asked you, David, because I feel like you're a bit of an expert yourself in this. And I'm speaking more broadly about call analytics, but I'm curious with Joe too, why it is, as we talk about marketing being broken, but more specifically that 60% of calls are still missed or 50% of calls are still missed. What are your theories? Maybe they're going to be the same here on why more property management companies, owners are not investing in call centers. So, in any one home, for example, there's a bunch out there, and isn't the whole idea is to ensure that each call is picked up? And I have my own assumptions about that, but I haven't spent as much time as the two of you have. And it's hard for me to imagine it's just cost because, if you're catching all those calls, you're getting more leads, you're able to drive rent. You know, the operators in this industry are at least that savvy, where I think they get that basic equation. So yeah, I'll start with you, Joe, and then see what David has to say about that.
I read right now. I mean, that's a great question, and I was fortunate. We actually initiated a call center service at Call Source. And by the way, the company's Leasehawk now. Mike Mueller bought that company in 2012, if you guys are familiar. So the company is still around. But there's been a crazy evolution in call centers in our space. Level one ruled it forever. Obviously, with Call Source, we were offering it to our clients. I think there's this weird stigma around them companies feeling they can handle the calls better themselves. And one thing I would always tell clients is, have every single call that you're not able to answer at the property, go to someone that can talk to that person and answer at least the top 100 basic questions. Because if not, especially in today's world, you have more information at your. So I'm answering this different now, Reed, than I would have answered it years ago with chatbots and all this other stuff at fingertips. I think it still goes down to the biggest problem our industry has had since I've been in the industry and it has to do with process and implementation and how these things are handled. And I think if you do it the right way with a call center product and do it for overflow or after hours, why would you not do that? I mean, think about it. Most leasing offices close at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. People don't even get off work until then. So I believe in either self-guided tours or online tours, or making sure you have a chatbot or even an after hours call center that can answer certain questions that people can't get the answers to. In the old days, people would say it was more cost prohibitive because X percentage of the people that were calling weren't even prospects. They were residents just trying to get answers thinking they'd get them quicker. And I'm like, okay, so what? You have a chance for a remarkable recovery there, considering that, the statistics show that most people, you lose most of your residents on renewal for two things. One, the move-in process sucked really bad, and they decided in the very beginning that they weren't going to renew their lease because of how awful they were handled when they moved in. And two are work orders. So let's talk about that for a second. The poor maintenance team is probably the lifeblood of a property once a resident moves in, and there's not as much investment. I mean, think about it when you move in. Anytime that you have a work order or you're walking around the property and see the maintenance guy, they are the face of the community, right? So back, read full circle. I think it has a couple issues. One, they believe it's cost prohibitive, and I don't believe that anymore. I think the cost has come down a bunch, especially for after hours and overflow. Um, and two, I think it's a process and a structure problem that it's not implemented the way it really should be to run efficiently within a company,
Sure.
especially the larger companies. They're not as nimble, and the larger companies are the ones that tend to use the call center more because they're either too resourced or don't have enough processes or structure, or they deal with, maybe they're a fee company and they deal with 50 different owners that want different things instead of them setting their standards.
Joe, I don't know why people don't invest in these, but I'm curious. You mentioned price a couple times. Is the typical model per call, or is there like a flat rate of property per call or something like that?
I mean, I'm going to be very honest, David. I don't know what it is today. I haven't even
Okay.
looked into, people. You rarely hear anybody ask about a call center anymore. They're asking about chatbots and things like that that can help answer questions through technology, because technology is cheaper than people. But in the old days, it was handled by either minutes or how many calls. Generally minutes, because if you do by calls and a call is 50 minutes
Hmm.
long and you do one and the call is a minute long, it's a different, it just doesn't
Yeah.
work. So normally it was done by minutes. And typically, at least at call source back in the day, we would eliminate non-prospect calls from that,
Okay.
because the
Interesting.
theory was
I'm curious.
eliminate the whole, oh, you're a current resident, please call this number, I'm going to patch you directly to the maintenance after hours line or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Reed, what were you saying on that?
Reed was giving me a hard
I
time
was
that I have no
surprised
theories.
David had no theories. He usually is full of them. I
I'm sure he
I
does. He's just testing me.
I would have such a hard time. I still do when we talk about this and when we see that data. How, as an owner, do you get over that?
I
Like
don't think they
seeing
see the data
50,
is the
you don't
thing.
think they're privy to the
No,
data?
no,
Yeah.
no. So Joe, just so you know, we built our own call tracking system because we didn't like any of the off the shelf stuff. And as Reed was saying, we measure like past the IVR, did the person get to a human? And and we see that, as Reed was saying, about 55% of calls go unanswered. And then even those customers with that are using a call center, they're usually about 25% of calls unanswered. And we're scrubbing out the, like, missed dials, like, the 3-second long calls. These are just people that don't get a human on the phone. And I don't, the reason I'm saying that I don't think they get this data is because we tried, CallRail, Invoca, Dialogue Tech, March. We tried everything, and none of them were giving that kind of data. And that's why we built our own system, is so we could see that stuff. Because it was very awkward when we would celebrate to a client on a reporting call. We sent you 100 leads or 100 calls, and we would count a call a lead. And they're like, I didn't get 100 calls from you. What are you talking about? And we're like, what? And then if we go listen, we're like, oh, shoot, these people never got to a human. So we're
Yeah.
beating our chest, but they didn't feel it. And so, anyways, now that we have that data, we can explain how this is probably an operational problem, and you don't need to increase your marketing spend. Let's just answer the calls we're sending you. But to Reed's point, if I was an operator and I saw that anywhere from 25 to 55% of my calls were going unanswered, I feel like that's the most important thing I would want to solve next. But I don't think they actually get that data.
Yeah.
Um, that's been. I'm just gonna bluntly say this. It's baffled me since 2003, and we had all the data from call source to know how many calls were answered, how they were handled, did a lease get set. We gave all those metrics too, and we back then we had humans listening to call because there wasn't the technology there is now to feed a whole line of calls in and have it score them. So it's and here's the other sad part: those stats you just threw out haven't changed. It's the same number of missed calls as it was in the old days. You know what I mean? So, and that's where I was saying earlier is where it gets a little frustrating. I've been in the industry since 99 and the average resident turnover hasn't changed. It's been 50 to 53% my entire career. Right. And I know we talked about that, but like at what point do you either accept it, like you said, David, or do you actually make change to make that number go down a couple points and really put goals in place? I know Moshe talked about OKRs for Measure What Matters, and I read it at a perfect time in my life, and when I recommended the book to him, I thought it was a perfect time of his life. And you know it's just impactful to kind of prioritize things. And I just think, and almost anything marketing related just hasn't been quite prioritized the way it should be. I mean, Reed, I think you just said, it's not throwing more money to generate, hey, we need more marketing or this ad so we could generate more leads. Well, what about the 40 out of 80 leads that they sent you last month that you didn't handle and you only thought you had 40? You know what I mean? And that's a high number, so those are the things I think we need to talk about as an industry more. I mean, marketing is always the first thing cut when times are bad. I mean, this year, this
But
August
I,
was the
but
most
I,
understood August. Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, Joe. I was just gonna say I don't see this as marketing as much as I see it as operations.
Oh,
Like
totally. I
yeah,
get it, but
and
it's a tie-in. It's
yeah,
separated. That's the problem.
right. They don't see it as the bridge, maybe. But what's
Exactly.
odd to me, and I guess I should be careful here because I don't know percentages, but what percentage of the industry, and when we say the industry, does that literally mean every single building? But if I were to say, for us, Sweet Spot, have what 75 units or more
Per
um,
property.
per property, are have adopted the chatbots versus have adopted the call centers because
Yeah.
they're the same use case, aren't they? And so that's what seems strange to me is it feels like there's, as you were talking this technology wave and momentum that far more are buying into these chatbots. And maybe it is more the cost than the use case, but aren't they serving the same purpose? Is they're trying to create more efficiency when those front end leads come in. So whether it's somebody else picking up the phone, making sure they're getting through some of those basic questions, or whether it's a chatbot, it really serves the same purpose. Yet it appears to me that there's far wider adoption of chatbots than there are of call centers. But unless I have the statistics, I could be wildly off on that. But in either case, it's perplexing to me. I did want to give you a chance, even though, and we appreciate it, and it's we try to avoid, as you were saying, the product pitching here on the podcast. But we didn't give you, I guess, a chance to just talk a little bit more about Synergy, just who the company is, what problems you guys are trying to solve, and what has you so passionate about it.
Yeah. I started Synergy 3 years ago, went full time 2 years ago. I actually, and I say this a lot, we have more technology than we've ever had in this industry, but now I think it's the opposite problem of what we had 7 years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when I thought we were behind in technology in this space. Now there's so many amazing ideas, so much, you know, I'll say young, since I can say that since I'm almost 50 and been in this industry a long time, but there's so many young ideas and different ways to look at things. But the problem is now I think there's an oversaturation. So I started Synergy to help some of these younger companies with great ideas, um, but no multifamily experience, how to really operate in our space. I mean, I say this joke a lot. We're the world's biggest high school, and everyone's in some kind of clique. And, there's 2 degrees of separation in our industry versus the 6 in the Kevin Bacon world, right? Like if I don't know somebody, I can call someone that knows that person, right? And as you're in it more, you kind of stick with some of those things and those beliefs, and you leverage your networks. And so I more started the company to help these companies know how to navigate multifamily and to help give them a good foundation of success and how to operate in this industry. But I'm not doing anywhere near, I mean, I am, but like more of what I'm doing is I'm able to work with clients at a pace that I would like to, and the companies that I like what they're doing in the space, whether it's ESG related. You know, I started a company around corporate social responsibility in 2014. It's a long time ago and way ahead of the curve. And now I kind of wish I waited a little bit, but those are the kind of things that I'm looking to do now. So Synergy was born to help those companies now. After a few years, I've been very fortunate. I have 2 day-to-day roles that I've taken. One with Gatewise, which is an affordable access control company that really focuses on B and C communities, not the ultra A like Smart Rent and Butterfly, but giving access control to those communities that historically haven't really been able to afford it, which I love that. It is a bootstrap company. I'm finding now I enjoy, after my fair share and time on boards and VC-backed companies, I've decided that bootstrap companies are a lot more fun, different challenges, but a lot less red tape, and you can be a lot more nimble in making those decisions and looking at the cash flow. Um, so not really doing what I thought I would be per se. I thought I'd have a lot more like 6 or 7 retainer clients at a time, but then I found out that I'm a relationship driven guy, like even in real life, right? Like I like working with, 1 or 2 companies deeper on things. So that's really what I'm doing now. I'm in the day to day with 2 companies, and then I'm involved with several more in the background, either that I helped found or either I helped found the company, or maybe I'm a part owner and with me, which was Print with Me, and I helped scale that company with Jonathan Treble back in the day, and Kimberly Cameron. So that's really what I'm doing. Is I'm really starting to have my hands in things that I enjoy doing, with clients that are like-minded in kind of the approach that I want. Look, I've had to walk away from clients before because I've literally done tons of work, and you do all the things and they go in a completely opposite direction. I'm like, well, you've done that so many times now. There's no real point in us work. You shouldn't be paying me to do this right now. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to be selective in those things.
Cool.
Well, Joe, one of the things I wanted to get back to was you had sort of mentioned how, or I can't remember if this was on air or off air, but I was getting a feeling that some of your attitude with the industry is like, man, it was just fax machines and cigarettes, in '99, and it hasn't come nearly as far as as maybe you would have wanted to see the industry come along. But I want to maybe highlight any of the biggest developments. So, like over those 26 years that you've been involved in multifamily, what have been some of the big wins? Like, what has like been some, as you see it, almost as like, wow, that was a real demarcation point for the industry.
That's a great question, David. I think there's been several. I mean, look, and please, I don't mean it the way as in like I'm more distraught, and distraught's a bad word in this case. I wish I would have seen the industry grow more with the technology at the fingertips, if that makes sense. You know, the past 25 years in this industry, it's 100x growth in technology and the way it's looked at. I guess I'll start with Vaultware. I think Vaultware was one of the first ones, and just happens to be Mike Mueller, who also bought CallSource, back in the day. But Vaultware, as far as I know, was the very first syndication of pricing. And to me, that was a game changer because it was the first step of putting real time, information onto a website that was easily accessible to prospects instead of them going to a print publication that has, pricing from a month or two ago. So to me, that was one of the very big first steps. And then obviously not the best thing right now, but when you talk about LRO and Rainmaker and just dynamic pricing in general, the hotel industry and the airline industry have been doing that for decades. So I think that was a big step, even though right now the FCC is involved with some of that, as we all know. And quite honestly, this is a whole nother, polarizing topic we can get into when we talk about PMSs and how they work. But the concept of PMSs are right. I think the execution right now is wrong, right? Like, especially as every single day I get a new invoice of some of these PMSs that have now quadrupled their integration fees. So they're monetizing their clients that they're working with and their data. So um, I could keep going and going and going, but every single day, I think there's something that pops up that moves our industry forward. And I also do think there will be a consolidation of technologies. You know, that's why I'm saying there's a lot of times confusion in the marketplace. I'll have a client call up and be like, or if even a friend of mine, just call up and be like, "Hey, man, I'm looking at doing this one thing, and there's 15 companies that do it. Can you just tell me the top two or three I should look into?" Right? And that's why I always say supplier relationships are equally or more important than operator relationships in this industry, because we're the ones that are talking to everybody. We're the ones that have our ears to the ground and know what's going up. And we're generally the ones that operators come to when they have questions. One of the companies that I'm in the day to day for, I'm actually on the operator side. I'm an agent for the owners on their side, handling their contracting and their ancillary needs. And it's been very eye opening to me the past year and a half, really being involved in the day to day, because there's just so many things that I feel could be done better that are either being done manually or being done with just the property manager or regional. And the turnover is so high at that level. When they leave, you're losing all the intellectual property of that person. So I'm actually shocked there's not more technologies adopted that kind of put a fail safe in place around that IP.
I appreciate that answer. That was great. Now I'm going to ask it a slightly different way, and this may not be fair, so feel free to just take your experience. But as you mentioned, 99, and I'm thinking like internet boom at that time versus where we are today. What I've never gotten a good handle on was multifamily. I guess from your perspective, um, where it's set compared to like what world class organizations and how they were run, let's say in 99, 2000, 2003, like as you were saying, that early when you started versus now, have other, and how, as you said, technology has advanced 100x. I don't know that property management has advanced 100x. So I'm wondering, is property management, in your opinion, losing ground about from where it should be about how a world-class organization would be run or an industry would be run, or is it kind of actually the same? It's just that it was property management kind of always a little bit behind, as you were saying, like hotels and airlines and things like that. And now it's still in retail, and now it's still just kind of behind hotels, airlines, and retail. Or is there basically, are those other industries traveling greater distances than we are right now?
I,
You forgot the third option.
What's that?
Are we gaining
Oh,
ground?
we're gaining momentum. Sorry, I want to be an optimist. We've gained ground.
I feel like that's what Joe said up at the beginning, is like that, we might be catching up. But yeah, what's your answer, Joe?
Look, I think the technology is there. I still think that our industry, now, with that said, that's why I take a bet. Like a lot of times I'll let, Wolber and even Moshe and, Trevor, a while ago, be like the young minds right now, right? Because all of us that have been in multifamily a long time, whether we like it or not, we're kind of stuck in the multifamily box sometimes. And I'm not going to lie, ideas that come my way and be like, that'll never work in our industry. And then I reflect like, you know what? I'm not going to talk in absolutes here. That's just my like ingrained answer, but I think that's part of the problem, right? Is there are amazing ideas, but they're all just not gaining traction and as fast sometimes. I mean, I could count tons of companies that have gone under with amazing ideas. I just think it's getting the right audience. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest problem, and I'm going to be careful how I say this because I don't want to offend, owners or operators, but at the end of the day, there's one purpose, and that's to have heads and beds and to maximize revenue and minimize vacancy. And unfortunately, if that's happening and the market is very good, a lot is overlooked when it comes to technology implementations, and it's more of a reactionary. I think part of the issue is we're more of a reactionary industry, and we don't spend money during times we should, and then we're forced to spend money during times that we shouldn't. So a lot of times it's reactionary in the fact that, oh, the market's going down, we have vacancies coming up. Now is when I'll do X, Y, and Z. When quite honestly, when you have heads and beds and you're collecting max rents on, on the market, that's when you should be doing new things so that when the market does go sideways, even if it's out of your control, COVID, things like that, be fast to adapt and fast to make change. And I think so overall, David, I think that's the biggest issue. I don't think we're short on technology and ideas and products and services. There's new ones every day. I think we're short on the capability and the mindset to actually launch some of these products during times where it's not as stressful. It's trying to be done during reactionary times versus proactive times.
Well, I do agree with that. It sounds like maybe you don't have a strong position on if we're gaining ground or losing ground, which is okay. I'm just
No,
making sure.
for me, I'd have to say we're gaining ground. How about this? Two steps forward, one step back. Can I say that? That's still
The
gaining
bunny hop.
ground.
I took it as, even though you didn't say it explicitly, that it was implying that we're actually falling further behind. And the reason I say that is because if what your assumptions are accurate, related to there's lots of good ideas in tech, but we're still struggling with implementation. The ability to, I guess, scale and test some of these new technologies. That's a compounding problem, right?
Well,
So it just keeps building
big
on
time.
itself, and that actually widens the gap as far as where we at in ratio or proportion to some of these world-class industries or companies. I don't know if that's true, but that's I guess that's what that would mean to me is if we still aren't really effective at bringing in new technology, then it's a compounding problem.
I, I mean, I don't expect you to incriminate yourself, but I'm sure you guys deal with it all the time. Our industry is great about vetting and, doing all the red tape check box, checking all the boxes when you're getting started. And then when you get started, they hand it off to someone else and they forget about it a lot of times. And I think that's detrimental. I think every product needs a champion at every company to kind of own the process and you know and at least build the excitement around it. And I think sometimes too many things either live and or die at the property manager and regional level. And I'm not saying they're not capable. I'm just saying they're already juggling 1,000 balls. So when your ball is no longer a priority, are they still going to juggle it? You know what I mean? That's part of the
Yeah.
problem. And I've always said that the regional level is the Achilles heel of our industry, not because they're bad, it's because of the responsibility of that level.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe I'm giving you a hot take or a little contrarian here, but if the problem is actually more the suppliers than it is the owners and the operators. So we frequently point that direction when we say that the industry's behind and that, whether it's heads and beds or whether they're just not as sophisticated as maybe some of these other decision makers in other industries. But what I found is we've had many founders on this podcast that are bringing new tech to the industry is one of their biggest struggles is how to set expectations and help them normalize kind of their evaluation. If you're not able to do that, you're not going to typically get very far.
Yeah.
And David's brought up a couple times some people that I won't say interviewed directly about this, but that have said all this new tech and AI and all this stuff, what has it really gotten me? When they look at it and they say, okay, are we in fact improving NOI? Are we in fact improving leasing velocity? And sadly, a lot of the times they're not seeing the results, or they just can't clear it up. And so that leaves them kind of in a bad position to decide whether or not to in fact roll something out across their portfolio. Is they're just
Yeah.
they're not the suppliers are not really effective in setting expectations, helping with the implementation, and then ultimately normalizing the picture so that I, as an owner, know for sure out of the 20 technologies that I'm looking at, this one actually works. So I
Yeah.
think that I'm not absolving the ownership or the industry air quotes from this equation, but I think actually suppliers have a lot more to do with it than we're acknowledging, which is great that you're somewhat of a, I guess, a new tech Sherpa for multifamily. I mean, those are the kinds of people that we probably need more of so that they can help them accelerate their learning curve in the industry and get a little bit better at those two elements.
Well, by the way, I love your perspective. And I don't disagree at all. The good the good suppliers have a complete implementation plan that they get by on before they do it. And I hate the word trial and pilot. Like, if anything, call it a proof of concept. You can't devalue. I hate devaluing things either. Right? Like, like if a client said, "Hey, can I try that for free for 3 months?" Like, sure. Can I live in one of your apartment communities for 3 months just to make sure I like it before I sign a year lease? And what's the answer, right? So generally, I always throw it back there. But you're dead on, and that's part of how you have to walk through and have some kind of implementation plan. Find out who the internal champion is going to be. Look, I'm a believer that it's a 50-50 effort for a product to really grow legs within a company. But you see the best benefit when all of that is established before the contract's even signed. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's enough expectations put in place around, I have so many companies like, okay, we'll do a free pilot and we'll do this, but they never actually establish framework with a client on what a successful pilot looks like. You know what I mean? Because your perception of something successful is different than my perception of something successful. So it has to be agreed upon, just like contract terms. So, but I love your perspective, and I agree. Like, the finger should never be pointed in one direction. And as a matter of fact, I think I said this before we even jumped on. I'm my own worst critic, and I have a hard time talking about the stuff I do well, but I do not have a hard time about doing the stuff that I suck at, that I work at every single day, which is why when you said, say one funny thing about you, I'm like, yeah, I have no teeth. Like, that's insulting myself, right? So it's kind of the same thing. And I think you have to establish that kind of relationships with clients without being scared to ask the hard questions, even if it means you're going to lose the sale eventually. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather find out post sign than sorry, pre sign than post sign if it's just not going to be a good fit.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tee you up for what I hope is another hot topic, or, maybe we can create some friction here, Joe. But you said you agreed with maybe with David or both of us, probably at different times. We've said that marketing is broken in this industry. But what else would you say, or would you, kind of put at the top of that list as far as the issues or challenges with marketing right now in this industry?
Um, I, I think I said market was broken before you did. You agreed, so there you go. No, I'm just kidding.
It started with you, Joe. We'll give you the credit.
Totally
We
kidding.
were
I'm
just
totally
following along.
kidding. Look, we just agree that it's broken. I think there's way too much emphasis put on, in today's environment, attribution and the need to put ROI on specific things. And look, I get you want to make sure the right things are working, but because of that, I think less emphasis is put on actual companies' property and corporate websites versus outside ILSs or certain ad sources, right? Like, I don't think there's enough investment put in property websites. And, I know for a fact that, a prospect may look at what 6 to 8 is the most recent. I think things online. They'll go to Google and they'll pick the first 6 to 8. But no matter what, if you're in their final 3 or 5 or whatever, they 100% of the time are going to go to your property website, make sure they're scoping it out. A lot of times they'll even go to the management company website. What kind of company manages that community? And I don't think there's enough effort put in that, which is why I just think the order of things is broken a little bit. I don't think there's enough spent on branding in our space. Think about it. We don't really have, I mean, the first company when I first started in the industry that did a really good job of branding was Post Properties. If you guys remember Post Properties at all, out of Atlanta, their big thing was tulips, and they had it everywhere, and they had consistent advertising. Everybody knew what a post property was because it always looked the same. Then Bazzuto did a good job of it, and other companies are starting to come around on it as well. But I do think that we have to try to get some brand awareness out there. A lot of times I'll talk to my friends that are still in apartment communities, and once they move in, they really don't know much about anything unless they have issues there. So, but think about how good hotels have done. I mean, hotels are the same as multifamily, just on a hyper turn scale. You know what I mean? So obviously there's brand awareness there. Is the 12-month lease model broken in our space? Who knows? But I think it's a lot deeper than just the marketing side of it, Reed. I think it has a lot also to do with how companies want to be portrayed out in the wild and what they think is important, when people are looking for an apartment. And I just don't think we've done a good enough job making it about what what their culture and brand and philosophy and reputation is versus who can spend more money on, SEO and stuff like that. And
So
that
if
may
you
be controversial. I don't know, but
well, that's what we're looking for. So if you were running a property management company, or you were just starting one, at what point would you start focusing on branding for the property management company versus the property? So we have this conversation not daily, but I mean, it feels like at least once a month with one of our clients who are considering that transition. And when I say transition, it usually is, they don't often start that way. There's probably less, right, David, property management companies that immediately think branding out of the gate. So I'm just wondering, if you were a startup PMC, would you begin focusing on branding that property management company day one, or would you start with focusing on branding the properties and then eventually get to branding the PMC?
I think it totally depends on footprint, type of company, whether it's owner or fee. If it was owner managed and a footprint like in DC Metro, I would try and start branding day one if my entire product was within a certain confine. And Philly's a great example. What's interesting about the Philly market is Philly is mostly ruled by companies that exist in Philly and have a footprint in the Philly metro market. A lot of these large national players like Greystar, yes, Bazzuto's there, Greystar's there, Avenue 5, few others. Like these Philly based companies have made a living branding themselves in the Philly market and also creating a tight network between all of the owners to make sure that they're trying to use best in breed suppliers and companies that are focused on being involved with the association there. And I don't think there's a right answer to the question, Reed, but I think it would totally depend on what the footprint is. um you know um oh my gosh, we work. Oh my gosh, Adam, why am I
Newman.
drawing a blank? Oh my gosh, Adam Newman, everything that they're doing down in Florida and start when that first happened, everybody thought he was crazy, doing what they're doing down there. And just changing our model of multifamily as it is, but they're trying to build a brand and also getting a recognition of don't be stuck into long-term leases and be penalized and all of that. So, I think we're going to see a little bit of that in the upcoming years because now with technology and what's coming down the pipe, I think it'll be a heck of a lot easier to to put a brand out there versus
Would
you
you take
know
that? Would you take that a step further? And I don't know if Adam Newman's doing this in Florida, but where you abandon the property name. So I'm going to use the "We Work, We Live," but there might be an address, that's associated with that, right? Like we work Fifth Street and, whatever,
yeah,
in Tampa. But yeah, I'm curious if you think that that could be the future, or if that would be a better approach. Cause I think that's one of the issues is they start to get conflicted about whether they should be doing both of these, one of these. And
yeah.
it's like, if the future is more the motel model or motel, sorry, hotel, whatever, Bon Viat or
Oh boy.
Bon Viat.
Ron Boy.
Bonvoy, then or the Adam Newman model, yeah, do you kind of let go of the whole property branding?
um Maybe eventually. Look, a company's doing this right now. Look into Redwood Living, based in Ohio. Um, they were one of the very first. Now you can say BTR, you can say SFR, like whatever, build to rent, single family rentals, whatever. They were the first ones to do that model, and they buy dirt and they build the exact same apartments everywhere throughout the country and branded exactly the same. So they're, you know, I make Redwood Mount Airy or Redwood Columbus, whatever, and that's how they brand themselves. So they've actually already started. Some companies are already dabbling in that a little. Here's the problem: it, it's it's either only going to happen. I don't see it ever happening with the fee manager because the problem is you can't guarantee what makes your brand and culture. And a lot of times, at least in our industry, if you're dealing with different ownership groups that require different things. Now I know it's like that in the hotel world too, but you look at a Marriott, they have certain standards that they have in place when you're at a Marriott that they must accomplish. And, Bizzuto's tried to put that in play a lot over the years of, hey, when you're hiring Bizzuto, you're hiring everything that we do. You don't really get a choice. But even they've been forced as they continue to scale to change that model. So, um, look, would I like to see brand recognition? Sure, it'd make things a lot less confusing when people become brand loyal. But I think the biggest problem that we face is, like I haven't lived in an apartment, like I said, I'm almost 50. I haven't lived in an apartment since I was like 24. You know what I mean? So, what's the lifespan of a renter, and is it worth getting brand loyalty, or is it better to focus on, demographics and geography, and I think that's one reason we haven't gone to branding. Is it's a lot more difficult task than it sounds, unless you're pretty much cookie cutting your product everywhere like Redwood Living does. Like, I know when I stay at a Marriott, I know what I'm getting. You know what I mean? When I stay at a
Totally.
Courtyard, when I stay at a Hilton, I know what I'm getting every single time, 99 times out of 100. And I think that's hard to do in our industry.
Well, Joe, I know we're close on time, but I wanted to know from you what's the industry not talking about that we should be talking more about? I feel like I go to all these conferences and we talk about AI or we talk about customer journey,
Centralization.
centralization. Yeah, it feels a lot of it feels like the same topics, but yeah, what's not getting enough coverage?
Um, Wow, David, you're a great question asker. I love it. You know,
What am I,
I
chop liver over here? I thought I got a couple good
no,
zingers in
no, no.
there.
Reed, you're asking more hypothetical stuff. He's asking more like, all right, if you wave the magic wand type stuff, I think. But yeah, I apologize, Reed. That was rude.
It's okay.
I,
I won't ever talk to you again.
uh, I think the problem is there's too many buzzwords. I mean, you talk centralization, and what does that mean? You talk AI, what does that mean? And look, I I was an early adopter in AI through ChatGPT, and I've had the subscription for a while now. I've changed the way I use it. Um, it does bring me new perspective. It's kind of like having a built-in mentor or a built-in fact checker and a built-in proofreader. You know, I think we're going to have more. I'm hoping, and I don't want to call it AI because that's a buzzword, but I'm hoping to have more processes in our industry streamline in a way that it's not based around like, for instance, i'm I'm not throwing names out, but there is a large top 10 property management company in our space that I am about to be working with closely, and they have no idea what's going on with contracts at any of their properties because it's always historically been done by property managers and regional managers, and they turn over 50% of property managers a year. So what
Hmm.
happens when that goes away? They don't know where all their stuff is. So I think we are truly going to have a good consolidation of services and technologies that will put true efficiency in how things are run. And I do think that the future of our industry is around maintenance technology more than
In-
anything. And I still don't think we're talking about it enough, but I know I keep saying it, but I think it's the area where we can save the most money, be more efficient, and create better satisfaction through response times and things like that.
Super interesting. When you brought up the call answering earlier, I was thinking we had June Doe on from HappyCo, and he was saying one of their fastest growing products was their like tele maintenance product where they could basically intercept calls after hours or that type of thing. And so it just seems like
Yeah,
it's
it's telemaintenance instead of teledoctor.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. Like, and it's funny. We can figure it out. I guess HappyCo figures it out on that side, but we don't figure it out on like the your standard phone number that's on the website side. So it's just interesting. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that, Joe. The last thing I had, I don't know if you have context on this, but last time we had pulled the numbers, we had seen that there were, let's just say 200,000 like multifamily buildings, like over like 75 units, as Reed was saying, and yet 10,000 management companies. So a lot of long tail, because as you know, as you said, Willowbridge, Greystar, they have like 1.5, 2% of the market, something like that. Um, so where does this go from here? Like if we look forward 20 years, do you see more consolidation of those 10,000? Are we going to stay about 10,000 management companies? Because I think those dynamics would change a lot about, how this industry evolves.
I'm going to go one step further. I actually helped build the multifamily vertical at Zillow 10 years ago. And a lot of people don't know this, but our industry, and by the way, I don't know the recent stats, so I'm throwing out a stat from several years ago. Our industry only represents 25% of the rental inventory in our country. The other is owner managed, non-professionally managed, under 50 units, they own a duplex, whatever. So not only do I think we're going to see a consolidation, I think that we're going to see some kind of crossover to where though even those things may be managed differently as real estate continues to grow. But I think we're already seeing a consolidation. I've seen more owners take management in-house and away from fee than I've seen in my whole career the past 2 years. I think we're going to probably continue to see that. I mean, I think owners have always thought they could do it better, but now they're investing in that process, especially as some of these management fees are sub two, and I don't know how you make money sub two other than unless you're a Gatewise or I'm sorry, not Gatewise, Graystar, or even Willow, a top five, but we'll say Graystar mostly. Like, I don't know how you make up for that other than volume, right? So I think we're going to see a consolidation of some things as time continues to go on, and that companies are still finding creative ways to replace costs with technology. But here, I'm going to caveat that there is a line somewhere, and Avalon was the first to really get rid of leasing offices and go virtual before COVID, and it helped them and all of those things. But at the end of the day, one thing I always say, and maybe I'm old school, but we're a people industry. And if someone's going to be spending 30 to 35% of their net income to live somewhere, like, that's an important purchase for them. It's there has to be people involved, in my opinion. Like, I'm guilty. I have bought a car. Actually, I'm going to correct that. I have bought my wife a car because it's her car. I'm not allowed to call it mine. So we got her a Tesla a couple years ago, and I was terrified, but amazed at the same time that I bought a car and I never talked to a human being. And even when I went to the dealership to pick it up and do my walkthrough, I got to choose whether I wanted to talk to a human being or not. And I thought that was fascinating, but then I realized it's still not buying housing. Like, it's not where I'm committing to live the next 12 months. So I think it'll be what really interests me about what I want to see in the future is where people truly fall into place amongst the technology. I really hope our industry, I'll be long gone, but I'm really hoping our industry doesn't get away from what makes it so great, and that's the people.
All right. Well, Joe, if people want to learn more about you or Synergy, what's the best way?
Shoot me an email, joe@synergymfa.com, or visit my website, www.synergymfa or synergymultifamilyadvisors.com. And
Awesome.
I'm very responsive, so I'll get back to you quickly.
Yeah, you were emailing with us 3 or 4 times this morning because we didn't have all of our ducks in a row to get you on here.
No,
So
that's not it. I
help
just
us.
hate not being prepared. I wanted to make sure I wasn't letting you guys down. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate you spending time with us today.